Okay, the button pressing has commenced, and we are brought together in this asynchronous moment. This is Jay Brown Yoga Talks podcast. My name is Jay Brown. If this happens to be your first time here, let me welcome you. And thanks to everyone for choosing to listen. Today is a special day for the show. Derek Sivers is here, and I am going to tell you about why that is so significant and special in just a bit. But first, I do want to report to longtime listeners, I'm not going to take a lot of time to do like a major check-in like I sometimes do. I don't want to get between you and today's conversation. However, if you have been listening in, then you know some weeks back, when things were looking at their most bleak for me, I, in a desperate rampage, applied for every potential pandemic assistance that I might qualify for. And over the last few weeks, I've been talking about that and really feeling very cynical about it and not having faith in our institutions that they would help me at all. And then this week, 2 out of the 3 things that I applied for went through. So I was approved and funded for a PPP loan, and then I also got processed for the unemployment assistance for gig workers that they legislated. And it's been huge. I mean, that loan, it made up for the losses over the last several months. And then now the unemployment assistance is some money coming in through the end of the year. And of course, now that I've gotten that assistance, I feel guilty about it. Like, there's lots of other people who probably need help more than me who aren't getting help. And that's a longer conversation. Maybe I'll speak to that some on the other side today. But I just felt like I needed to mention that this happened because I have been, talking shit about our institutions, and then they actually did come through for me this week. I will say, if you tried to get a PPP loan and it didn't go through, it's a very good idea to apply again at another bank. From what I understand, it really often depends on who's handling your loan application. And I think the reason why mine went through is I have like an over 12-year business relationship with my bank that started with me getting an SBA loan back in 2007. So that long history of relationship between me and my bank and the SBA, I think, is why mine may have gone through where others are not. And in terms of the unemployment assistance, I just think it has to do with your state that you're living in and how well they're managing to implement this new program that really doesn't fit in with the existing bureaucracy based on wage earners, But props to Pennsylvania. Thank you, Governor Wolf. He managed to make it happen for me. So, for whatever it's worth, felt like I had to mention it. Can't just bash my government and then not give them credit when they do something right. Not that I think our government's doing everything right now, but at least in this moment, something that the government has done has helped me, and I am grateful for it. And it was right about the same exact time when I was in the depths of despair and, frantically trying to fill out these applications that today's conversation happened. You see, Derek Sivers is a person who I would have never imagined that I would get a chance to speak to, much less get to record a conversation for this show with. Like, if someone asked me that question where they say, if you could have any 3 people, dead or alive, over for dinner, who would it be? Like, I might have said Derek Sivers is one of those people that he's someone who really I've taken inspiration from and has had an impact on me. And I would have never thought that I would ever get a chance to talk to that guy. And it still blows my mind that this happened, honestly. I talk with Derek right at the beginning some about exactly how this came about, so I won't spoil that. But just to say that I was really feeling down, and then all of a sudden, I've got an email from Derek Sivers scheduling time to record with me. And it really felt like the universe was trying to hook me up. Like it was a friend and it was saying, hey man, I'm sorry things are so fucked up right now, but I know that it would mean a lot to you to talk to Derek Sivers, so here you go. And the conversation had such a wonderful effect on me. Like the same things that reading about him and getting his emails and stuff does for me, like the kinds of synapses that fire when I think about that I've taken that have been useful to me, were really brought to a wonderful fruition in this conversation. And it had this lovely effect of shifting my viewpoint, which Derek talks about today, you'll hear. And I'm just overjoyed that it's been documented and that I'm getting to share it with you today. Very quickly before we get to it, let me just drop some of my stuff here. If you are interested in finding other ways to connect with me, there are lots of ways that you can do that. The tour dates are all on hold now, but there is a 12-hour online workshop that you can take. There's also some on-demand practice videos. And then, of course, if you want to get into some real time with me, there's weekly live classes and my teacher's call. Or even if you just want to spout off about some stuff and shoot me an email, all of it can be found at jbrownyoga.com. All right, that's good. Let me not be long-winded and get us to the matter at hand. I will touch base with you on the other side. But for now, I recommend that maybe for this one you sit down or you not be multitasking. This is one that I think deserves our full attention. Please enjoy this conversation I had with Derek Sivers. Hello.
Mr. J. Brown.
Mr. Derek Sivers.
By the way, thank you for not doing video. It is so much nicer to just do audio.
I never do it.
It's a weird trend that's happening now. I think people are just getting used to doing video conferencing. So even if they're only going to use the audio, a few people lately have said, well, let's just turn on the video anyway. I'm like, ew, no. That's so distracting to see my face on the screen. And
I know. I was writing this recently because for a while I was doing live streaming where it was just one way. Mm-hmm. And that was really just performing for a camera. And then it's a little different now that there's two-way, because I can focus on other people and not myself, although it's hard. But when that's gone and it's just voice to voice like this, it feels like I'm talking to you, and there's not that me looking at myself in the camera thing.
Exactly. Yep.
You'll have to forgive me this one moment because I've been on your mailing list for a lot of years, and I want to give some credit to my friend and producer, Josh Citron, because he's the one who turned me on to you many years ago. And he was a composer and a musician who was an early adopter of CD Baby. And he, brought you into our conversation when he was educating me about how to use what I was doing as like a independent creator in a more effective way to make a living, essentially. How to find a way to make money off what I was doing without completely destroying the thing that I was doing or something. Oh. And you've been like kind of an oracle to us of sorts. Like this is the matrix that we're in, you're a bit of like the oracle for us. And so I've been on your mailing list for years. And you don't send out a lot of emails. You know what I mean? It's not like you do regular email blasts or anything like that. And so when a few weeks back, you sent out an email some weeks ago, and in it, you had this note to your people on your list saying, hey, I want to connect with you. And if you have a podcast, email me and I might come on your show. I knew that I was going to email you. And I kind of wanted to make it an exercise in what I think of as the ideas that Derek Sivers has propagated or that I've integrated. And it was this exercise in I'm not writing this email to try to get Derek Sivers to come on my show. Like, I really genuinely in myself managed to achieve a state where I had no expectation that I was going to ever get to talk to you. And I just wrote the email because it was meaningful for me to do so. And I thought, that's the spirit of Derek Sivers. I'm going to, and I shot it off. And then you actually got back to me. And then even that exchange, that email I sent you, even though it was basically in my mind the equivalent of a Hail Mary pass. And this moment feels like the touchdown. You know what I mean? That I'm actually speaking with you. And frankly, just to add, this moment's coming after a string of kind of shitty days. So it's just even more special. So thank you for being so accessible and for giving me some of your time. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thanks, Jay. That's like the sweetest intro ever.
Well, again, I find that you're a mix in the things that I've read of sometimes really practical, pragmatic information that I think applies to like doing business. And then at the same time, there's so much sensitivity and heart to it. So that was my play for you. It was to say, show you my heart and see if you would respond. And you did. And that's amazingly cool. So
thank you.
In any case, to start us off, I had emailed you some thoughts. And one of the things that I was thinking about when I was thinking about getting a chance to speak to you was that, I have understood that all the things that I've done that have been successful, they started out as just like I was describing to you, like I'm getting to talk to you now as just a process of, inspiration somewhere from within me. And yet at the same time as things have gone on and I now have a family and I have, responsibilities, I have had to feel like I need to be more strategic. I need to have a spreadsheet and look at trends and see if I can make informed choices. And doing some of that has helped me. But I know that you starting CD Baby, and I guess people who don't know you might not know that, but you were one of the first people to have like an internet venture in CD Baby. And, my producer, Josh Citron, I think I mentioned, turned me on to you. And that example of CD Baby was something where it clearly started out as just an inspiration. But as time went on, I'm wondering, did that change? And since then, how much of what you've done has had like a strategic component from the onset, or does that come in later?
I think it has to start with an inherent or intrinsic fascination, right? Like, unless you really are completely broke and desperate and just need to do something to make money right now this week, usually we try to find that balance of something we like to do that is smart to do. And I think smart is a nice shortcut for the idea of strategy. Strategy almost sounds conniving, but you just call it being smart. Sometimes though, you don't need to balance. Like, you can just decide that this thing you want to do is not smart, but it sounds incredibly fun. So you're just going to do it anyway. And this is going to be the fun part of your life. Instead of watching TV or whatever else people do for fun, you're going to start this ridiculous venture and create a new board game or start painting a painting every week or whatever it is that is fascinating you right now. You're going to learn how to speak Hungarian. There's no practical reason for that. But if it's exciting you, well, that's life, You do it because it's fun. And then, you could do something just for strategy, like just for the profit. And in a way, that can be kind of a different kind of fun. Kind of like exercise, right? Like, for most people, exercise itself isn't that fun, right? Like getting up at 5:30 in the morning to go jogging. It's like a deeper happiness, right? It's not the shallow happy of eating ice cream. It's the deeper happy of not eating the ice cream and being proud of the results. So sometimes when you do something just for the strategy, you're doing it for that second level happiness that it may not be the instant joy of writing a song, but it can feel really good to go out into the world and try to make money and have it work, and that can be really smart. But in your question, there was an interesting kind of between the lines idea about justifying the time and effort.
Well, that's what I was going to say, because my example they sent to you was that, I write a blog every month, 800 words at least every month that I think would be interesting for someone to read. And I've been doing that for over 10 years now. And I've long felt like I would like to just sit and write like a longer thing. Like I feel like I've got at least a book or two in me that I would really like to write. And it would be hard work. It would be like you're describing, not like the pleasure of just sitting and having a cocktail. It'd be more like the pleasure of having to work out, because writing is not exactly the easiest pursuit, but I would relish that. However, I do have all of these responsibilities, and the kind of time it would require me to stop doing other things that I'm doing that are providing me income.
Right.
So I would have to sacrifice the potential well-being of my family to pursue this heart project of writing a book. And having looked, as I said, like strategically, maybe not smartly, but having looked at like, well, what would happen if I self-publish a book now? How many people are on my mailing list? How many do I think I could sell? Well, how much money would that be? How much time am I going to have to put in to write this comparatively? I did the whole analysis, and I thought, I can't justify it. It just would feel like irresponsible.
Got it. Two thoughts on that. For one, my first book, the one that's out on Penguin called Anything You Want, it took basically 10 days to write or to put it together, and probably a total of maybe, 12 hours, 15 hours, because it was just a collection of articles that I'd already written on my site. And then Seth Godin said he wanted to turn it into a book. And all I had to do was that 12 hours I spent just kind of filling in some in-between chapters, kind of like another 20 or 30%, some stories that I had forgotten to tell that were necessary to include. And that was it. That was my first book. And it's on Penguin and it's out there in bookstores. And so you just said that you've been writing every month for 10 years. It sounds to me like you've already written the book, and you'd be doing the world a favor and saving them a lot of clicking if you took that and made it your first book. Kind of hire an editor to just give you a bit of outside, a second point of view, an improved outside perspective. And then, maybe you put aside 5 or 10 hours to take the editor's suggestions, make the improvements, and voila, there's your first book.
Well, I have started to do that. Actually, what I started to do was put them out I just went back from the beginning and started recording them as audio first, to just sort of like put them out as a podcast because I wanted to. It's just fun to go back and read them, record them. And then I am going to release it as like you could pay for the whole audiobook, or you could spend the next 5 years listening to it.
Okay.
That's sort of the plan. But again, I could certainly do that, but I have another book in me that I think would, it's different to write something larger with a cohesiveness to it, not just my monthly musing.
Unless, sorry, I don't mean to, lay you on the workshop bench here.
No, I like it. Push back. You don't know me very well, but you were allowed to push back on me. Please do.
I'd argue that even this next book that you have in you, you could approach it the way that you have been with your monthly blogs. Maybe you turned it into a weekly chapter or a monthly chapter, whatever. But I've just found that releasing things a bit at a time, for one, it gets the ideas out in the air. It lets them breathe a bit. It lets the world see them and start to give you some perspective that you might not have considered, especially if you were to just going to keep the whole book to yourself until it was all done. I think it's better to, a piece at a time, start to put it out, even if it's just a really long article you put out. Maybe you start writing 2 articles per month now, and one is for the next book, and one is for, just the site, or something like that. And then next thing you know, a year has passed and the book is now done because you put it out into the different segments.
I'm going to get that that's instead of just having it be like, oh, I go up to the cabin for a year and write it. You just like spread it out over smaller pieces. It doesn't all have to be one shot.
Right. Yeah. I'm going to go to the cabin and make this happen, like Stephen King's
and have the pressure of that on you. Yeah.
Right. And then Annie cracks your ankles. So yeah, that's kind of a recipe for failure. I think a lot of people have tried to do that, and I think it's just healthier and better and more strategic to just do it a piece at a time and then not make it a huge, giant, overwhelming thing that you're scared to do. Okay, but I have another idea around this whole subject. Okay, is how a single viewpoint can change everything. So you said in there, or we've been talking so far about this idea of justifying the time and effort. But imagine if somebody that you really respected super highly, maybe even a guru, told you that sharing your thoughts with the world is the most important thing you could possibly do to leave your thoughts for future generations, because you might die at any time. So it is crucial that you put aside the time to write now before you die. It is the most important work you could possibly be doing. And if somebody you respected told you that, you wouldn't be looking at the book as much as just like, I don't know how much money this is going to earn me. It's like, no. Take that out of the equation. This is the most important thing you can do. Or somebody could tell you that writing a book is one of the best things that you could do to develop your brain. They could say, the thought process and the way that you hone your ideas and your thoughts, the process of writing a book is one of the best things you could ever do for your brain. And Jay, I know you believe in self-improvement, so you must write this book and make it a top priority because it's one of the best things you could do for you. Well, suddenly, the way that you're judging that action can be completely changed by a little flip of a switch or a flip of an idea or somebody shuffling your priorities like that. And so I wanted to tell a little story of how that process made me leave America.
Okay. I know you left America at one point, so
10 years ago. I haven't been back since, really. So it was 14 years ago now. 14 years ago, I was in Portland, Oregon, and my friend was a realtor. And she showed me this gorgeous house that she had just sold that day. She's like, oh my God, you got to see this house. And she showed me the website. And oh my God, it was breathtaking. It was like, oh, that's my dream home. Oh my God. And it's right here. And it's on the edge of the forest. And oh my God, that's great. And for about a minute, I daydreamed about buying a house like that. And like having kids and grandkids and a dog in that house. And then about 1 minute later, I was horrified at the stagnation of it, because I kind of took that minute of joy of imagining myself living in this dream home. But then I imagined a scenario like, wait a minute, do I really want to be like 80 years old and somebody asks me, how long have you lived here? And I say, well, I got this house 45 years ago and I've been here ever since. Do I really want to say that? Or when I'm 80, do I want to be saying like, hey, honey, what year were we living in Beijing? Was that 2019? No, that was 2021. Oh, yeah. Then when did we move to Argentina? 2023. Oh, yeah, now I remember. It's like, for some reason, that little scenario with the voices and everything that I just said, like thinking of moving to a house in Portland, Oregon, which to me is for me personally, is like the least interesting place on earth I could live, because I'm like a sixth generation Oregonian. Nothing against Portland, but it's like, for me, that's the least ambitious place I could ever be, versus living in the whole world. And just that one single minute of comparing those two scenarios in my head just instantly made me go, I got to leave America. I got to get out of here. It's time. And I did. And literally like a few days later, I booked a one-way flight to London and left, and did come back for a few months. And then about a year later, I left for good and haven't been back. And it was really because of that 1 minute of reframing a decision of where to live.
Well, I appreciate that. And I certainly get your point about one small little shift in viewpoint changes the whole direction. And that's a conversation that happens on the show a lot. I have all these different academics and philosophers like translating ancient yogic texts. And those texts get translated almost entirely based on the viewpoint of the translator. And you can see how a shift in viewpoint has drastic shifts on the behaviors and the choices that somebody makes. I'm curious with you that shift in perspective, like that bit of facility, that moment of pause right there when you were considering those two different visions. And of course, you could have envisioned living in that house in Portland in a different way that didn't seem horrible. That could have been like a really wonderful growing old and being close to your family kind of vision. Doesn't have to be a bad vision, but that moment of pause where you were able to make a choice, that I find a really interesting moment. And I'm curious how that developed in you. And I should say, you don't know this, but I lived in Manhattan from 1990 until 2005 before I moved to Williamsburg, Brooklyn. And before I was like into yoga and had a yoga center, I did have a few years as like a starving musician. I played electric bass in this very awesome and weird avant noise jazz semi-improv band called Dim Sum Clip Chop. And we had one album out actually produced by John Zorn. You might know who he is. But he basically just gave us like some money to have studio time because nobody had Pro Tools back then or anything. You had to actually go to a studio. And so getting into yoga for me was really like a counterculture move. And New York at that time, you could do it. I had an apartment for 10 years that was like $450 a month. So you didn't need to make a lot of money to live there. Yeah. And I had like all these musician friends. And CD Baby was like the thing because it was the way that you could get your music out there right at the beginning of the internet.
Yeah.
And so I've heard you talk about that in other interviews about how that happened and how you were just a musician doing your thing and you wanted to sell your album. And I guess when you started CD Baby, did you already have this like facility in yourself to take pauses and make choices like you described? Or did that come about? And if so, how do you think that came about for you? That kind of facility in yourself or even sensibility or viewpoint where you're making choices in that way?
I didn't start getting this reflective until after I was 1 foot out the door with CD Baby, meaning from the age of like 14 until 29, I was like absolutely head down focused on being a successful musician. And then at 29, I accidentally started CD Baby. And so for the next 10 years, from 29 to 38, I was absolutely massively blinders on, focused and driven to just make CD Baby a great service for musicians. So it wasn't really until the last year or so of CD Baby, when it was running itself, it didn't need me anymore, that I started lifting my head up and considering different ways of approaching the world. So this kind of pausing, as you say, I think didn't start until then, which is why I never fault people for not doing it now. Like I always assume that whenever I'm talking about this, all this introspective changing your point of view stuff that there's probably a large percentage of people listening like, yeah. Skip forward. I don't have time for this. I got money to make. I got stuff to do, and I get that because I was like that for 25 years or something. I didn't have time for esoteric, different ways of looking at things. Like, come on, trying to get successful here, just trying to get my work done. So I get that and I don't fault it, but yeah, I'm like pseudo retired now, so, I get to just be reflective a lot and take my time to look at different ways of thinking of things.
Well, I appreciate that because also, first I want to say something else just to everybody listening. When you said you were focused on making CD Baby like the best thing it could be for musicians, I want to actually cite the things that I think you did that made it so good for musicians because it's exactly the same things that I say to yoga teachers all the time about their online pursuits. And cool. This, again, just shout out to my producer, Josh, because he's the one who schooled me on this. He's, that you would get paid every week and that you got to know the names and get the email addresses of all the people who bought your album and that there was no paid placement. Like nobody could pay to like get theirs in front of yours. It was like an even playing field. And those qualities.
And wait, and there's one more.
Oh, what was the other one?
Sorry, this was really fun. I'm beaming here because I actually haven't heard these 4 points in a long time. I almost forgot them. If you would have asked me, hey, Derek, what are the 4 missions that you set up CD Baby with? I would have said, Jay, I have no idea what you're talking about. But hearing you say them, I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. But you made me remember the fourth part of the mission was we will never kick you out for not selling enough. Because right. I know in the long tail word of the internet, it's like, YouTube doesn't remove videos that aren't being viewed enough. But in the old world of music distribution, yeah, if you gave 500 CDs to a traditional music distributor, and if they weren't selling enough at the stores, they would kick you out. And they'd say, yeah, we're taking it off the shelves. You're not allowed back in. Like, you're not selling well enough. Don't come back. So yeah, that was a founding mission of mine too, we would never kick you out for not selling enough. Sorry, but continue. I'm enjoying this thoroughly.
Good, because it also, for me, is a bit of a formula for right now for people who are independent creators. I'm a big fan of, I'm sure you've heard of that idea, maybe you haven't, of like 1,000 true fans.
Yeah, Kevin.
Of like not needing reach, but having depth. And part of that is like what we just said, like having like 4,000 email addresses makes me more money than other people I know who have 1 million Instagram followers.
Yep.
So, and having it be, for me, a direct relationship and exchange of value, and not going through like third-party portals and stuff. Yeah. But we'll get to that. I want to go back to one other thing, because you just said you were graceful enough to admit that it is in the freedom of your semi-retirement that you get to be more reflective. And I think, and I'm saying this for myself out loud, because part of me feels like, well, fucking A, if I could sell my company for freaking $22 million, then I could sit around and reflect all day too. But at the same time, I know that even just getting ready to talk to you, I was like listening back. And that's why I have those notes, because I was listening back to all these old interviews and reading these stuff that you had written. And I was re-inspired. I like deleted shit off of my phone again. Like there are lots of things that I can do, it's not this. It's a little bit of a red herring almost, this idea that because I don't have money, I can't employ these ideas. But at the same time, if I didn't have the stress of these mortgage payments and debt hanging over my head, especially right now, considering everything with the pandemic, it certainly would be a lot easier for me to employ some of these ideas.
Right. Yeah. I kind of see it as my job. It's an unpaid job, but it's a bit of my job now to think of these things in the same way that somebody who decides that they want to be a stand-up comedian, like part of their job now is to look at the world and say, what's funny about this? What's weird about this? So I feel like it's a bit of my job to look at the way we do things and say, like, how else could this be?
Well, I really appreciate that too. And I want to say also that I do feel like you give back with what you do. And I know I said that $22 million figure, but I also heard you talk about how you didn't take all that $22 million, that you actually made sure almost all of it went to charities. And that's something that I've really thought a lot about too. In fact, I have a number for myself that I said, if I ever make this amount of money in a year, I'm giving the rest away. Like, I don't ever need to make more than this amount of money.
Nice.
And that is a really liberating thing to do. You know, I've not hit it. I'm not even close there yet. I mean, it's not that far away because it's a pretty modest target. But having that feels very important. And I got that some from your story a little bit.
Cool.
Hearing about what you did with CD Baby and why you chose to sell it. Like, it wasn't, you know, like, Josh was a little like, CD Baby changed after you left, as I'm sure you know. I know you probably don't pay attention to it, but there was something that you were doing when you were still like taking the 45 minutes to make each page for each album, you know? There was an interaction there that, I don't know, I guess part of like the scaling of everything is that got lost some.
Yeah.
So in any case, I guess where I want to go with you now from here, it has to do with when you do start to, I don't know, try to find this, maybe not balance. Maybe we're not going to balance our inspiration and our, our strategy. Maybe we're going to go be smart and we're going to go headlong into things we want to do. I do know at some point you do need to like have spreadsheets, because I ran my yoga center for, you know, I would say 7 years. Just on just pure gut and on, if more money's coming in than going out, I'm fine. But at some point, you know, the rent outpaced me, and I did feel like, you know, I needed to be smarter about making choices. So I guess I'm wondering, when it comes to, I don't know, being smart, do you think that there's a point where it's foolhardy to just be that reflective? Like, I don't know. I know my question's not really well formed, but
no, I know where you're going with this. But I don't think that spreadsheets are necessarily the answer. I've actually
that's just my way to signify. But I guess to put it clear, you write really simple things, like 2-minute pieces, and they make my heart sing. But then I'm like, okay, but what do I do with that? Like,
right?
Like, there's something more that has to happen sometimes than just simple formulas, I guess.
So this idea of, you know, hey, more money is coming in than going out. I think that's kind of like the equivalent of saying, well, I have a roof over my head and I have enough money to eat, so I'm good. Like, there's really something powerful to that. It's a really, really great thing to know that you have a roof over your head and you have enough money to eat. So you know what? Everything else is a luxury. So when you're running your own little small business and you can say like, yeah, more money is coming in than going out, I'm good. Like, that's a great place to start from. But just like as in life, we should hopefully go beyond just a roof over our head and money for food. You want to go beyond that. You want to get into self-actualization. You want to see what you can be, see what else you can do that goes beyond that now that you've reached that initial foundation. So the rest, to me, doesn't feel like necessarily being smart in the terms of like furrowing your brow and looking at a spreadsheet. To me, it's more like play. It's like, okay, well, now that I've just got the basic foundation, let's play. Like, let's play with business. Let's play with marketing. Let's play with finding out what else I can offer my clients. Like, that to me is where it got fun. Well, I guess the whole thing was fun, but once that I realized that this little hobby of mine was now profitable and people were telling me that they wanted it and they liked it, it's like, oh wow, for the first time in my life, I'm doing something people want. You know, my years as a musician were, you know, it was an uphill struggle the whole way. Felt like nobody really wanted what I was doing. So when it was clear that people wanted CD Baby, I was like, all right, rock on, let's do this. This is fun. So then I would like pick up books on marketing and I'd say, okay, how can I apply this? I don't know. How can I apply that? Ooh, what if I tried this? And I would just try these little things. And, you know, 2 out of 3 of them would get no response, but 1 out of 3 would go well. And it's like, oh, okay, people liked that thing. Okay, what about this? And it's just playing And those things that I was playing with would boost my, oh, God, I don't even know the term. What do you call it? The top line? Because we say the bottom line when you're talking about like the sum result, but it would boost my top line. So I wasn't nitpicking about what I was spending each month. I wasn't doing the spreadsheet approach, but I was constantly trying to do new things to sell more CDs for my musician clients, or do new things to help reach more musicians, or do new things that would make my existing clients happier and therefore tell more people about me. And these were all just fun. I had fun picking up these business books from the bookstore and trying things every week. It was just play.
I appreciate that. I've had people on actually talking about like the science of play and flow states and stuff. And it makes a lot of sense that if you can take what would sort of seemingly be a grouchy task and make it playful, that certainly opens up your perspective and possibility. But I would also say that you were also a little bit maybe right time, right place, because as they mentioned, it was this early time in the internet. I remember, frankly, back in my musician days, not a lot. I don't know. A lot of people know this, but like I was doing cannabis deliveries, but it was at a time when I was using a beeper and payphones because there was no cell phones or internet yet, right?
Nice.
So you came in right at the beginning of the internet where nobody. And I loved hearing you talk about getting a merchant account. In 2007, I had to get a merchant account.
Wow.
And I didn't have to go through the same number of hoops you did, but I did have to jump through a lot more hoops than you do now. There was no Square and PayPal and all that stuff.
Yeah.
But it seemed like at that early time in the internet, I remember being on BBS systems, and like doing phone freaking. And it was such a like formative time for the internet. And I have also had Douglas Rushkoff on, who's like one of my other oracles.
Cool.
Particularly his books on the internet were really, important for me also. And I guess I'm just curious about that because you are, I don't know, you're sort of out of the game in a sense. Like you started the game and then you kind of found a way to transcend the game or something. And I'm curious how much you have, I'm sure you pay attention to something. If you are hearing this message, then you're listening to the free version of Jay Brown Yoga Talks. To hear the rest of our conversation, please subscribe to Podcast Premium at jbrownyoga.com/premium.